Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Team Braconi Live. I've got Alfredo here as always helping me host, and we have a special guest today, Ken from Guardian Title, who's going to tell us a little bit about title insurance, how it works, what it is. So with that said, I was going to ask Ken, when did you get into business and how did you decide that title was kind of what you wanted to focus on, and have you maybe seen it change as you've entered the business and so through today?
It's a good question. I was doing pharmaceutical sales, believe it or not, in about 20 years ago.
My wife does that.
Yeah, I know. And I was bored. I just didn't like it. I want to do something different. Always love real estate, still do. A friend of mine said, you should sell title. I'm like, what the heck is title? Yeah, right. It's like most people are probably thinking today. And talked a little bit about it. He said, go get your license. I did, got into sales. I started selling, did really well with it. And turned into a business. Opened up the company about 16 years ago now.
How long were you in the title industry before you felt comfortable? And that's a big step. That's a big step for someone to take in any business, but it's a very competitive business. And I don't know a whole heck of a lot about it, but I know that we're solicited constantly on our team. We've chose you for a reason. You've provided undoubtedly the best experience we've had as far as service and customer service, doing the closings and the things you do. I'll let you get into that. But when did you feel comfortable? How much time did it take, and what made you kind of go down that path of, because not everyone does that. Let's face it. Most people don't open their own title company.
So I was doing sales for a little over 2 years and I didn't feel comfortable opening up, but I didn't have a choice. I started one title company. They weren't providing good service. I couldn't work with them. Jumped to the next, then to the next, about 3 or 4 companies in 2 years. Got to a point I was either going to leave the business or try my own. I'm a service freak. I want to do things differently. I saw what they did that I didn't like. I said, we're going to do it at our company, and that's what we do. So I went in with like 2 feet, hired one employee, Kathy, who's still with me 16 years later, and we just kind of grew from there.
We have an experience, and Alfredo does too, and my team, where we've dealt with other title companies. Sometimes attorneys will have their own title company. We always recommend you guys for a reason. And we see there's a great disparity with the service that we get, with response time, with mistakes that are made. What did you see that you didn't like with maybe some of the other companies that you really focused on, which has made you get to the top of the industry?
Yeah. I personally hate calling a company and getting put on voicemail. Right, getting a press 1 for Ken, 2 for Steve. So we don't do that, our company. Right. You know, we have about 20-something employees now, and we still pick up the phone in 2 rings or less, if possible. Things like that, answering phone calls, emails back quickly. But most importantly, if you say you're going to do it, you do it. I'm a big proponent of, if I say it's going to happen, it will. And if I don't know the answer on something, I'll get it to you.
It's easy to say that.
It is,
but it's very hard to do.
But we do it.
But you do it.
We do it. So we do. You know firsthand. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's a kind of a theme of the vendors that we partner with is we know how stressful the process is for our clients when they're buying a home.
Very.
The last thing we want them to do is call their lender or their title and not get hold of someone. Even if they cannot be answered right away, they're talking to a human being, and that's hugely important. So that's great observation, or not observation, but that's great that you provide that.
Well, especially when it comes down to sometimes the numbers. Yeah. They maybe think there's an error. Maybe there's not even an error, but when they look at the closing statement, they feel as though there's something wrong. Or what is this fee? The ability to explain that in a manner that's clear, but also effective as far as I'm immediately responding or picking up the phone call versus letting things sit, because things that sit are very stressful, right? So you guys have done an excellent job at that. As far as what is title?
Yes.
Right.
Like, we're still trying to figure that whole thing out.
I was in the business for years before I quite understood just the very basics. And I still, this is your domain. But if you had to really break down just title itself, as far as it applies to our world with real estate, what would be the Cliff Note version of the very elementary explanation you would provide?
So the Title 101 explanation is, it's an insurance product that protects the buyer or consumer from future defects that may arise from closing. What does that mean, right? When you close on a property and we do title search, we have to search out the property for open liens, judgments, mortgages, taxes, sewer, etc. If my searcher misses a mortgage because they spelled Braconi with a K, B-R-A-K, my searcher maybe can't find that, and we close and miss that mortgage, that becomes a lien to the new buyer. So if he didn't have title insurance, he has no claim on it. He has to pay it or fight it in court himself. So they put a claim on a title policy, and we go and protect them from things like that.
Just even to break it down more simply, can you even explain what a lien is for our audience, as far as if something gets put on the title? If they didn't find something, what is a lien? Now I own the property.
A mortgage.
And I have a lien.
A mortgage.
Right. Debt.
A judgment. A judgment is basically, let's say you you don't pay your doctor bill, or you get into a car accident outside and someone sues you. They're going to probably put a judgment on you. So that judgment will remain with you. So any move you make trying to buy or sell property, title companies will run a search and will find that in the state of New Jersey. For
some people forget that they may even have a judgment.
100%. Yep. 100%.
As far as different, I believe in New Jersey, the title fee, because there's a fee that the buyer pays. Mm-hmm. That's mandated by the state, correct? So there's a fixed cost. So what would be the determining factors that a consumer or a buyer in this case should look for when retaining title services? I mean, a lot of times they're going to be recommended by the attorney or the realtor, which we do because we have a trusted source. Sure. But in the event perhaps that doesn't happen, or they want to do their own due diligence, what would you recommend that the consumer do?
It's a tough sale for us. It is. We really can't sell on price or cost. There's a little bit of flexibility, $100 maybe here and there if we're lucky. Depends on the transaction, what kind of searches we have to run. Example of foreclosed property, we have to run what's called a chancery abstract. We're not going to talk about that today, but that's an additional $200 itself for the chancery abstract. But I'm a big proponent of service. I talk service. I talk the team. Guardian Title, we have about 22 or 3 employees. We have like 150 years experience. My staff is like me in the fact they answer the phone quickly. They get back to you quickly. They're knowledgeable, obviously. We've done over 50,000 closings in 16 years, so we've seen it all. People don't really know what they're calling about, so they want to hear money. But if there's one issue on it, they're going to say, shoot, I wish I went with someone a little more experienced.
Of course. I also noticed that you guys, I think always, I can't recall of an instance you didn't have a closer at the closing. And oftentimes you host those, especially when we were in the trenches of COVID, and attorneys weren't comfortable with having closings at their offices. You had some closings with us in the parking lot of your building.
We did it all. Right? Mask, gloves.
So what would be the reason you feel as though it's worth your expense as the owner of a title company to send a closer or to have the closing at your facility with one of your staff there reviewing it versus sending it to the attorney and letting the attorney handle it?
Yeah, I think the closers, believe it or not, attorneys are great and they should always be involved in the transaction. When it comes to the closing side, they see the paperwork probably more frequently than an attorney may. Things change. Some banks have different documents. Some have different forms need to be signed. Some don't need to be notarized. Some do. So it's good to have them there, a second set of eyes, second person to explain the forms. Also going over the closing statement. So when I first started, it was a HUD. Now the document's called a CD. It's a closing disclosure. They changed. The attorneys kind of didn't want to get involved in that anymore. So now the closers have a little bit more experience than attorneys may have in explaining, what's on that form there.
Can you explain just to our audience a little bit about the closing statement itself? Like what is, it seems like it's a balance sheet and I'm pretty familiar, but how would you describe that to someone? And what would you recommend the consumer, the buyer or the seller look for in their columns to make sure it's accurate?
Good question. So like you said, it's like a balance sheet. It's a cost for everyone, for the buyer and the seller. First you want to make sure the purchase price is accurate. Sometimes we get a title order sent that it was $1 million and they lowered it to $990 for whatever reason. If we weren't notified that, it might still say $1 million on there. So you should check purchase price. Their loan amount is what they're looking for. Sellers should look at the realtor fees, make sure they're charging what they promised. Title fees, they may not know, but at least kind of look if they're in line with some other websites or guidelines that they see out there. If taxes are being paid, you want to know if you're being paid through the next quarter and when are you due for that payment. If we close today and I pay through the first quarter, that means the next payment isn't due until like May.
Right.
So you want to know that.
Right.
So things like that.
How often would you say, this is a fairly broad question, but how often would you say you see an error at some point during the transaction? So not necessarily when you finalize it, because you guys are meticulous with these details and I see it go back and forth, but from the initial statement to the final approval, how often would you say that there's some sort of error, some sort of editing that needs to be done?
Yeah, it happens pretty often. And like you said, we get it done before we kind of meet with the client. That's most important. But as far as a real estate transaction as a whole, I always tell like my friends or my family when they're buying a house or selling, I say, look, there's 12 people involved in this transaction. There's probably 2 realtors, 2 attorneys, an appraiser, a surveyor, a title. Someone's going to maybe fumble a little bit.
Yeah.
So just be prepared,
Right.
keep your head up, communicate, and hopefully things move along the best way they can.
Can you explain to the buyers out there how early they're getting that, and when they do review it, who's the best contact?
Sure.
I mean, obviously we know doing the business, but it'd be nice to explain people who haven't been in that process yet how they can go about reviewing, because as you said, it happens often. There's too many chefs in the kitchen.
Correct.
And the numbers are flying around, and then things are happening last minute. So you went over what are the key items to review, and who are the key people to reach out to, or maybe it's just one person to reach out to so that they can correct it.
Yep. So about 7 years ago now, they changed the law and they came out with the TRID guidelines. And those guidelines, one of the big pieces or components of that was the lender was to pass along the closing disclosure, which is the numbers, the balance sheet, to the buyer 3 days before closing.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say at that point, your lender would probably be your best point of contact. Your attorney probably gets involved, reviews it with the lender. We could always help as well at that point. There is some final stuff that may change, but it usually is very minimal at that point between those 3 days from the day of closing. But to answer your question, I would say the lender a few days before closing will be your best point of contact for that.
Right.
With your company and just a title company overall, and you have a fairly large company, but from the time you guys get a title order, I guess is what you guys refer to it at, to the time it closes, can you explain the process and kind of what staff might be involved during that process? Because I imagine it's more than one person assisting with a file, similar to a lender or a realtor. We have different people that assist us through the files. So if we give you, or if the client gives you a call and orders title, or usually an attorney will assist with that, to the day of closing, can you just briefly explain the process and what staff might be involved in that process?
Sure. So in our office, we have a order entry person who gets the order, processes the data, puts it into our software. Steve's buying a house in Wyckoff, and buyer, lender, realtors, sellers, etc. From there, we order searches or multiple searches, a county search, judgments like we spoke about earlier, tax search, which we all know about taxes and water and sewer, a couple other things, tidelands, etc. Once that search comes back from our searcher, our title department would grab it and produce the title binder, or title commitment is what we call it. Basically, which shows what's out there. The seller has 2 mortgages, 1 judgment, taxes are paid, what have you. We provide that to all the parties involved. Mainly the attorneys and the lender want to see that. From there, we move it right to closing. Our processors from the closing side get right involved. They start tracking down fees and numbers. They bug you for your commission statements all the time. And they start putting together as many figures as they can. And at that point, it becomes a waiting game for usually the lender and just the buyer and seller to say, hey, we're ready to close.
Yeah. And with your company, it seems so streamlined. It's almost like everyone knows it's like a team, right? Everyone knows their position, knows their job. So it's funny because it's seamless, but I've worked with other title companies. That's not the case. It's a bit choppy.
I worked at other title companies. That was the case.
Right.
That is 100% true.
Yeah.
It's very seamless. I almost, on all our transactions, I almost rarely hear from you guys because you guys are doing everything you need to do.
You're a step ahead. If you're a step ahead, it's just less to deal with. You're active, not reactive, which is a big difference, which we strive to do on our team as well.
I just hear ready to close.
Yeah, that's the goal. You know me, I'm not a big out there kind of guy. I'm not crazy with social media. It's about business. It's about getting the job done. At the end of the day, I could be, the biggest guy on social media, but if I'm not producing your closings efficiently, timely, and customers don't walk away happy, it reflects on you.
And when we joked about this, and it's true, and I don't mean this the wrong way, but title is not the most
fun,
exciting, fun, entertaining thing, but it's crucial to any real estate transaction. It's probably, if not the most important, definitely up there with.
Yeah, and it's expensive.
And expensive. It's
people are paying
for
something.
It. You have to. There's not really an option. Are there examples of when you've gone through a file that might have been funny in the end, or things that stick out in mind because you do so many files where you're like, oh, this is a kicker, something that might have made you laugh?
I actually have a funny story about someone who purchased at the closing table. Happened to know this person, If she sees it, she's gonna kill me. But I'm gonna tell her about this after I leave. They were at the closing table, and she got into arguing with the seller, and she threw her cup of water at the seller right at the closing table. I heard it. My closer came back.
Is that why I saw
I think that's assault.
me
Yeah,
they're not at the closings anymore.
And yeah, exactly. So our notary was there, came back, told us the story. We were all kind of laughing in the office. So it was kind of something to brighten the day up. It was funny. That deal closed. They're happy. But we've had some crazy things too. Wire fraud's a big thing right now, as everyone kind of knows about. We've had it happen to us before. Cops involved, Secret Service gets involved.
With the wire fraud, and I don't mean to interrupt you,
Sure.
but that's a great point. And you could see nearly at the end of every signature line of every attorney now, in red you too, is a liability waiver. If something to the effect that don't respond to this email, if we ask for wire information, we'll call you, or something to that effect. Have you seen that progressively get worse, like most cyber security issues? Yeah,
100%.
I had an issue myself years ago, before it was a big thing, that someone hacked into, didn't even hack my email. It actually was spelled with an extra N. I have one N in my last name.
Yep.
But the attorney who I knew said, "Why would you want the funds sent to your bank account?
Yep.
This doesn't make any sense. Can you please give me a call?" And I'm looking at the email. It's not my email. And I'm like, oh, geez. Yeah, definitely not. I don't want to be involved in this. So we shut it down. But people, I know a builder actually in town in Franklin Lakes, and his server got hacked to the point where they had all the internal information. So they took the COO.
Passwords.
Yeah. But they were internally taking all the emails and speaking to each other to get wire information. And they actually did it successfully. He ended up getting the money back. But it was internal. It's all tracked. And they knew that whoever did that knew who to contact regarding which issue on which deal. Yep. I mean, it's very intricate. So how do you guys prevent that stuff? And
so we have a lot of things we do internally. I don't want to give us some trademark secrets.
No, definitely not.
But just honestly being cautious. We have a team. People have to sign forms that they review things carefully. Then there's a second layer they have to sign as well. That they double check instructions, etc. We use different resources that we have at our fingertips, our disposal. But yeah, when it happened to us, it kind of changed my mindset on it. I want to leave the business at that point. I was like, this is crazy. What are we dealing with now? It's brand new. I was one of the first title companies that I heard of through the underwriters. We write insurance for it that got hit at that time, probably 5 years ago. So it's tough, but we do a lot. We have a lot.
Probably it was a blessing that it hit you that early.
Could have been, yeah.
Because you probably really changed a lot of protocol that up to that point was probably unnecessary. We didn't really see it up to a certain point. Then all of a sudden it became very common.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
And to that conversation, I've been hearing a lot about people taking your title, or I don't know if it's more fraudulent, commercials that they're just trying to create a business out of nothing, or is that something that's really coming up now?
Yeah, I haven't heard of that. I haven't heard any clients have that happen to them, but I've gotten questioned about that probably half a dozen times or more over the past year, I would say. That Title Lock is selling a lot of
right. Do you think that's something that people are just trying to sell additional insurance now, or is it something that we should be concerned with in the future?
I don't ever want to say don't be concerned with it, because when it happens, this guy said you shouldn't be concerned with it, right? Who's that guy on Steve's podcast? Definitely keep their eyes open to it. I can tell you this: I don't know how those companies work it and when they notify you or how it works. There are certain counties in New Jersey. I know Ocean, for example. I don't know about Bergen up here, where they will automatically notify you for free once something new goes on record on your property. Now, it might be too late. It might be a forged deed. At least you know right away, rather than when you go to sell 4 years later. So some of the counties offer a free service. So if people are interested or concerned, they should call their local county and see, at least they can be notified. Hey, there's a new mortgage. Okay, I just refied. It's okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's stuff like that out there.
Okay, that's some good advice for sure.
One of the things we talked about on our team is I entered the business about 20 years ago, and I've seen so much change, especially with technology and especially with lead generation. I've spoke about this on the podcast. I asked this question before, but then I asked 3 follow-up questions and diverted you away from the original question, which was, how have you seen the industry change? How long have you been doing title?
About 19 years.
19 years.
Yeah.
So basically the same as myself as far as real estate. But how have you seen the industry change as far as the process itself? Us selling a home is very similar, as as the titles itself. But the process in which you get from point A to point B are till the end is a little bit different. How about
a little bit? Yeah. I mean, software is a big part of my world. If our software can do things better or faster or easier, it helps. So our software, we've had the same software since I opened, but they've added a lot of bells and whistles as we went along the way. Ways to automate emails to people, ways to automate numbers plugging into the close and disclosure we talked about earlier. Obviously, social media is a big part of the world right now. Really hasn't changed how we actually do our business, maybe how we can go to market a little bit. But if I put an email at blast or a Instagram post out, probably not going to get phone calls to title tomorrow.
Right.
Our business. So maybe you might. Hopefully, hey, I'm thinking about selling my home. Give you a call.
Which leads to title.
Which leads to title. Exactly. So it's kind of more beneficial for the people that deal with the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
We deal with the attorneys, exactly, the realtors, etc. So technology is advancing with software. I would say mainly was the biggest thing for us.
It's very similar.
Yeah.
And then with regards to title itself, and you gave a very good explanation on a very low level. Is there anything else you would add to people that are watching this as far as just the basic understanding of title itself? You explained, why to get it, what it prevents. Anything else at all that, on a slightly higher level, but still being, I know you understand it the intricacies.
I mean, I would say, work with a reputable title company. It's very important. Not just us. There's a lot of them in the state, but do your diligence. Ask your realtor, your attorney. If they're working with them for a year or so, there's probably something good going on there,
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, the relationship probably fall apart. Don't be afraid to call them yourself. We don't get a lot of calls from the buyer or the seller directly. Calls, ask me some questions. What am I paying for?
Yeah.
And I can educate them a little bit. I got a call before I left actually today. I can educate them on what they're buying, why they're buying it. I've closed over 50,000 deals over the years. That's a true number. And I have one client that we know, he's a repeat customer who does not buy title insurance because he pays cash. And you do not need title insurance if you pay cash. If you have a lender, you have to have it. He's the only person to ever do that in my business. He's probably done it 4 times. I could tell you when insurance is never fun to pay for, but when you don't have it, you need it, it really could hurt.
But that's crazy.
It's crazy.
I've been a cash buyer and I am a cash buyer.
Yeah.
We're looking at another
I've done it too.
now. There's no way.
No way.
I'm waiving that.
No.
I mean, if it's one thing I wouldn't waive, just knowing what I've known and seen what I've seen.
Yep.
And things come back later too. That pop up later that
Correct.
there's these buyers are now covered for because they have an insurance policy in
Correct.
place. And if they didn't, they think they're free and clear, and then something pops up later. And it's usually, to your point before, when you go to sell. So 100%. I hear from these clients 8, 10, 12, 15 years later, and I see that issue, and it becomes resolved through the insurance and that sort of thing. And it's a little bit of a process, but at least it's covered.
Correct.
If you don't have it covered, that's another whole issue.
The type of claim. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, how complex does it get when you're dealing with older and older homes? You're talking about chain of titles, which if people don't, maybe explain that a little bit about dealing with chain of title and running into issues where things are not matching up.
Yeah. So the older, the harder, the more. Let's go back further on the search. We could go back deeds 60, sometimes 100 years.
Where the records are not great.
Records are not great. And they're hard to get. It takes a lot of time. So they think we're holding the deal up because we're trying to pull county records, which
are those
aren't
still available. Sorry to interrupt. Are those still available electronically, or do you have to go
up to 10 years, give or take?
And then you have to go to the
courthouse. Yeah.
Wow.
And then some of them aren't even there. Then after a certain year, let's say I'm making it up, 70 years ago, they're archived in books, which the county has to then deliver. Then my searcher has to wait for that. And
do you have someone specifically on your staff that kind of specializes in that?
I outsource that.
I was going to say that seems like a job in itself.
Don't forget, there's 21. We do business everywhere.
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to send my employee to Salem County tomorrow to get a search.
It seems counterproductive to pull them out.
When you have someone that actually is doing it all the time, and they're accustomed to going to those areas.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
That's what they do. I don't want to risk missing one thing out there because one thing could be a $600,000 mortgage.
And I think that's some of the stuff. That's why I asked the question. Is this is the background stuff that people have no idea what's going on just to get your title clear.
You know what the fun stuff is when we get someone passes away and there's Mary and Joe on the property, then Joe dies, and then Mary dies, and they got divorced, and their siblings, and it just the tree just goes on and on. We have to really chain that up and kind of make sure that we don't miss a signature out there because cousin Joe might have rights to the property,
and that's not a legal sale. if they don't sign, right?
And then
or becomes at least complicated.
And then he might come back and say, hey, that's my property too.
Right.
So thank God he has title insurance, or the buyer had title insurance.
Right.
So
yeah, and I've run into issues with maybe just dealing with getting COs, certificate of occupancies, where the records for that particular municipality burned. So you deal with all kinds of things that could come up, and you're trying to do your search, and you get you call them, and actually we don't have those records anymore. We lost them in the fire in 1970. So there's a lot, there's a lot of
you're fighting the fight to get your deal closed. Yeah.
A lot of complexities that come up with people, and it's all being done in the background, and you guys are going about your business diligently.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's seamless. If you do the job the way that you guys do it, the way you should do it, it's seamless to the consumer. Listen, I appreciate your time so much coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I think that's a great general understanding of title, because again, it's not necessarily exciting, but it's extremely important for buyers and sellers to understand the process of title insurance, why you guys do it, why you do such a good job, and you're protecting the consumer on both sides, really.
Yeah, for sure.
Alfredo, anything?
Yeah, just thanks for coming on again. And I know, it takes time out of your busy day. If anybody has any other questions or comments, they can reach out to us on our Instagram account at Team Braconi or S Braconi. Any topics or anybody from specific industries that you would like us to interview, feel free to reach out.
The feedback has been amazing, and
I'm sure
the support is. I said this 2 weeks ago, but I continue to get like high school friends I haven't spoke to in a while.
Yeah.
Like I had an elementary school friend. I had a guy that I trained jiu-jitsu with years ago reach out to me and just say, "Hey, I pulled up your online podcast. You guys did a great job." So it's a nice feeling, and again, we're very open to feedback and suggestions, and what, to Alfredo's point, people want to hear. We'll kind of dive into those topics as well. But Guardian Title, you guys do a great job. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, we thought that this topic would be interesting because it's a area of the business that people don't have a strong knowledge of, or just any understanding of. So
awesome.
Thank you again.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.